My most humble pranams at the lotus feet of our beloved Lord, Bhagwan Sri Sakti Sai Baba, and my loving sarams to you, brothers, sisters, respected elders, and children. A very warm welcome to tonight's study circle with our very esteemed host, Dr. Rajen Cooppan. I am sure most of you would have enjoyed listening to Dr. Cooppan and very much looking forward to another spiritual journey as he captivates the fear and faith during the pandemic. Today's format is slightly different from the previous one. Dr. Cooppan will talk for 1 hour and 15 minutes. Please keep your microphones muted. Thereafter, we will field questions, comments, or any interaction till 8 p.m. If you want, you can use the chat box for your questions and comments, and we will read them out after the doctor has spoken. Brother Anab will help us with the chat box. Please raise your hand after the talk by Dr. Cooppan for any comments you would like to make, and we will give you an opportunity to speak. I would like now to hand you over to Dr. Rajen Cooppan. Jai Sairam.
Om Sairam, dear devotees. Greetings to you all, and I hope that all of you are safe. Our topic today is on faith and fear in the COVID era. Specifically, we're directing it at the COVID era, mainly because of the accelerated experience that so many of us are experiencing around what this virus is doing in human life. Now, let's start with the understanding and the experience of fear. Every creature alive in a body, be it human or animal or otherwise, experiences fear in some respect or the other. And it's very interesting that in the brain, and we now will talk about the human brain, but animal brain is equally relevant. There is a structure called the amygdala. It's a nucleus. There are two of them on either side, sits above the ear and about 3 centimeters in. The amygdala is the fear center. It's a physical structure that has evolved throughout our evolutionary trail, and it is geared toward defending the organism or the host through fear from anything that may be threatening. Now, in our evolutionary trail, that would have been predators. And so this part of the brain is in fact also known as the emotional brain. And it basically operates totally different from your neocortex or the new brain, in that it can pick up cues from the environment, such as facial movements, eye movements, changes in smell, changes in temperature, facial muscle movements. And within 1,000th of a second, it will create an instruction to the rest of the brain and the body: fight or flee. And it is so fast that its effect is dominant in human life. Now, it's no accident that Swami, in many of his discourses, spoke about this fear. And he indicated that whatever has incarnated into the three-dimensional world will be exposed to fear. There are 11 sources of this fear, ranging from doshas in the body to the elements and so on. But suffice it to say that we all have experienced or are experiencing fear in some way or the other, and it's mediated through this nucleus. Now, remember that this amygdala is primed for fear, so it will react much, much more aggressively when we are under fearsome conditions. And the opposite is true, that it is also the motivation center. But you and I both know how hard it is to motivate ourselves to achieve something greater. And the reason is that this is a biological design. It's designed to protect you against danger. And it is pervasive all throughout. And Swami has defined it for us, and he said that the Rudram is that which brings fear. Now, in the current circumstances that we're living in, under the influence of this COVID-19 virus and the lockdown and all its consequences, we're starting to notice that this fear factor is in fact magnifying in many people's lives. Now, for us as devotees of Sai, we have to understand what that exactly means. And so it means that the outer environment is provoking the experience of fear. And it will come up in many different ways. So, for example, during the time of the looting, there was fear, or the fear of the danger of losing our lives, of losing our homes, losing so many things. The fear of dying from COVID-19 is ever present. And no matter how much we try and second guess this virus, it has its own way of entering the lives of people. And so we have this factor playing out throughout humanity at the moment. And we as devotees will need to figure out a way as to how we can, in fact, deal with this fear. Now, remembering that it's a biological process, it is mediated through the mind, and therefore it is the mind that has to bring this fear under control. So many different types of fear are besetting us now in the last 2 years. One of them is the fear of mortality. So in other words, the fear of dying. And how many times have we heard Swami say, life is like a bubble. It can pop at any moment. So that readiness, that if that should happen to us, is part of the preparation. Can we do it? The second type of fear that is dominating is the fear of uncertainty of the future. Now, this is perhaps one of the most stressful things for people in the world, and in particular devotees, because we have no way of knowing what kind of reality is going to unfold for us in the future. Should we survive this COVID experience, what kind of a life is there going to be? The fear of financial collapse is huge across the world. And we can see how different industries, institutions, governments have experiencing economic collapse at an astounding level. And it's percolating down to the individual level, within homes, within communities, within families. And this is another huge fear in its own right. The fear of losing people within the family. I'm sure all of you have your own story of families where they've lost breadwinners, 2, 3, 4 people in a family die, leaving behind young children and other members of family to cope. And this is a devastating experience because it dislocates the entire experience of just who we are and what is our role and position in the world. And it brings us to a very, very important concept, and that is that the world we live in is constantly changing. The one thing we can guarantee about it is that by virtue of the interplay of the 3 gunas, it is ever changing. Nothing remains the same. Whether it changes in our favor or not in our favor is dependent really on karmic circumstances, how our karma that we are coming into this life with plays itself out. And so we may see some people going through the COVID very COVID experience very easily without too much of effort. Others cowering in terror, especially in the early days when the lockdown was introduced. We saw how the psychology of people changed. You could see the fear in their eyes. And certainly at a patient level, we were seeing this. Now we are seeing another type of fear, and that fear is the fear of losing their moorings. In other words, the fear of losing their mind, the fear of nervous breakdown, the fear of mental breakdown. And this is an ever real specter, because we see it at the front line where health workers are confronted with this death and dying experience every day. We see it at the level of doctors. We see it at a level of patients and their families. And so it's almost as though this specter of fear is percolating through human life. Now, how do we deal with this fear? Well, the first thing that we have to understand is to recognize that what you may be experiencing is some form of fear. Once we acknowledge it, then we can do something to counter it. That it is there is not anything to be embarrassed about. All of us go through some version of fear at different times in the day, for that matter. But as spiritual aspirants, we are on the path of wisdom, the Brahma Vidya that Swami has given us. It's the knowledge that supersedes the mortal body. And so when we start to study that aspect, we come to the experience of faith. Now, faith is an attribute that is located within the human intellect. Swami described this inner instrument, the antakarana, and the higher mind is the intellect, consisting of, described as a bird. The head is faith and intuition. The tail is sense and mind control. The right wing is rhythm, the cosmic rhythm of unity, purity, harmony of thought, word, and deed. The left wing is satyam, the eternal, unchanging truth. And the body of the bird is our spiritual identity, tat tvam asi, I am that. Now, the head of the bird then is faith and intuition. And what is that experience of faith? And it is an experience, it's not an intellectual concept. Faith is that experience where we trust in something to the point where we know that it is going to do this or that or that. So let's take a very mundane example. You walk to the wall, the electrical switch on a wall, and you flick it on. And in full faith, you expect the light to come on. And it does, given all that the circumstances are correct. And we have faith in, for example, a pilot who's piloting the plane. We don't go and check his credentials before he flies. It's a given that if he's flying the plane, he has a competency that we have to trust in. So there are elements of trust. There are elements of knowingness. There are elements of confidence, and there are elements relating to complete dependence on. Now, when we use the word faith as spiritual aspirants, we are in fact using the word relative to, firstly, ourselves. In other words, do you have faith in yourself? Do you have self-confidence? Do you have self-esteem? All of those are facets of faith. And then, of course, as we grow in our spiritual ability, we encounter the experience of faith in God. Now, you and I are extremely lucky in that we have encountered an avatar through some great karmic grace. You must have done something really, really enormously good in other lifetimes to have earned the right to be born as a contemporary of an avatar. And the Sai avatar, as we know, are three beings: the Shirdi Sai, Satya Sai, and then the Prema Sai. It'll span an era of 300 years. The Shirdi Sai has already manifested and left that body. Satya Sai has manifested and also left that body, and we await now the Prema Sai. But this element of faith straddles all three avatars, because it is the primary quality that we as devotees have to depend on. Now, faith, let's start with it at a level that will make sense to us. Faith is, in fact, that attribute that will conquer fear. When we develop this attribute of faith, it will, in fact, bring under control all elements relating to fear, anxiety, worry, etc. And so, whilst faith is something that has to be developed gradually, what is the means by which this faith, in fact, grows? So Swami, in the Summer Showers 1990, in a chapter entitled Vagaries of the Mind, he described this inner instrument, and in particular described this aspect of faith. And faith is developed. Remember, it's an abstract experience, but it will show in your daily encounters with life. That faith is developed by means of a process called the bhagavatam, right? The bhagavatam. The bhagavatam is the exposure of our minds and our emotions to the life of avatars, previous avatars, and their devotees. And we experience how the devotion of the devotees was evoked and elevated to the supreme level of parabhakti, supreme devotion to God. Just that encounter between avatar and devotee has allowed that process to develop. Now, Swami has said to us that when we consistently expose our minds to the leelas, the mahimas of the avatars, then this quality of faith begins to develop, because in that encounter, it's like a food being fed to the mind. We begin to understand the omnipresence, the omniscience, the omnipotence, the omnifelicity of an avatar. We begin to observe how the avatar has stepped in and through his grace rescued devotees from any number of dangers, including death. We observe how the avatar will intervene and provide that grace so that the devotee could still survive in that body and move along their spiritual path. And so this Bhagavatam is a very subtle but very powerful tool, spiritual tool. And we are lucky in this day and age in that we have access to the different stories of the avatar in many, many ways. We have it in video format. We have it in audio format. There's YouTube. There are many books, such as so for example, the Bhagavatam of Lord Rama is the Ramayana. And Swami has written an amazing description of that whole story. It's in one volume called Ram Katha Rasavahini. It's a brilliant read because this is the avatar himself as Rama narrating the story of what had happened. Beautifully written. And once you go through that process, you begin to emotionally connect with this avatar as Rama. In the Mahabharata, which is the Bhagavatam of Lord Krishna, again, we experience this this closeness of the Krishna avatar rescuing his devotees in the circumstances that they were challenged by, taking the Pandavas through this war and leading the whole of humanity to the next age, which was the Kali Yuga. And so here's an interesting thing, that the Bhagavad Gita was not written for the people in the Dwapara Yuga. It was written for the people of the Kali Yuga. It was given at the end of the age of the Dwapara Yuga, and it is a handbook for us to understand our true identity and all the elements of how we live in this three-dimensional world. And of course, the Bhagavatam of Sri Satya Sai is the Satyam Shivam Sundaram. I'm not sure how many volumes, but making the effort to read that story from his pre-birth and all across the eras. And we will then begin to experience this Sai avatar in the early stage, the first 16 years of his life, where he exposed people to the Leelas, the play of God in human life, exposing them to an otherworldly reality. And then the second 16 years were the age of the Mahimas, the miracles. And this is where faith can really, really develop and grow as we immerse ourselves in these stories. Now, for newer devotees, this may be something that's uniquely different, because reading about what this avatar did at that time of his life, the older devotees would have experienced these stories. Much of it we've read, it's chronicled in different books written by Professor Kasturi and many other devotees. But suffice it to say that it is this engagement with these stories of the avatar that develops the faith. We become more convinced, we become more secure in the idea that this being that we knew as Sri Satya Sai Baba is in fact an omnipresent being. He's everywhere at the same time, all the time. And his grace is ever present for us, no matter what our karmic redemption has to be, no matter what the current challenge is, he will protect. Now, the faith that Bhagavan Sri Satya Sai Baba, who is our Sadguru, will protect is what true faith is going to be about. The other element of faith, besides just protecting us from danger, is protecting us from other forms of disruption in our life. For example, protecting our reputation, protecting our health, protecting our financial wherewithal, protecting the elements in our family members, protecting us against dangers that appear at a political level all across the world, protecting us from the dangers of the elements. And as we can see, the whole world is erupting. All 5 elements are in turmoil. And this is a balancing process that Mother Earth has to go through for our benefit. And so when we begin to understand our relationship with Swami, then that faith becomes even more important, because when you then read the words of the avatar, and remember, Swami said, my words have the power of my presence. So you may be reading a book, let's say it is Summer Showers 1990, and you're reading the words of Swami, and some statement or phrase or instruction that he has given piques your attention, grabs your attention. And you then begin to take this on and you attempt to apply it in your life. Now, for someone to take the words of an avatar and implement it in their lives requires highly developed faith. In fact, it is a measure of our spiritual base. How strong has the spiritual base become? And the fabric of that spiritual base is faith. That we would, through our experience, through our reading and experiencing of the words of Swami, and remember, this is the actual words, so you need to make sure you're reading things like the Satyasai Speaks, all the Vahini series, the Summer Showers series, and so on. Those are the actual words of Swami. Books written by other devotees, great for also developing faith. But if we are to benefit from the presence of this avatar, then there are some internal changes that have to happen. And he has given us the route map for that. And so when Swami says something like, without changing the diet to a sattvic diet, there can be no spiritual progress. Avataric declaration. Now, do we then have the faith to put that into practice? Do we have the faith to implement it? Maybe not all at one go, but certainly the ability to recognize it and make the effort to implement it. And we can go through many different commands or commandments that Swami has given us, but your own awareness, your own conscience will tell you whether you have the faith to follow what he has instructed us to do. Now, the stronger the faith, the more the conviction that these words that Swami has given us are firstly true, and secondly, they are pivotal to our progress spiritually. And that deepening of the faith can only happen with that simple process of exposing yourself to the bhagavatam of at least Satyasai, but we have the other avatars as well within our grasp in terms of accessing their bhagavatams as well. Now, here's the most interesting thing that Swami told us many, many years ago. I heard it probably in 1986. And he said, you come here to Prashanti and you experience me. All your days here in Prashanti is a beautiful experience of the avatar. And so even little things like going to the canteen, experiencing things there, meeting other people. Swami has said that Prashanti Nilayam is an amazing mirror. It will reflect back to you what is in you. And so if you meet angry Sevadals and you meet people who are in conflict, that process is really already in you. And the mirror reflects back what you've got to change. What a wonderful understanding of this concept. And so when we are challenged by things that the avatar has given, then the spiritual base is what we have to look at within ourselves. In other words, how strong or how feeble is that fabric? The stronger our faith, then we can almost deduce something from that those that have a strong faith, that are unshakable in their faith, they have emotional equanimity, they tend not to worry, and they apply common sense in everything that they do. They are courageous devotees. They can go through whatever is thrown at them, depending on that inner wisdom that Swami dwells in my heart, the Antarayami, right, the indweller. That connection, that resonance that Swami is always with you, suddenly takes away the entire realm of the mind. In other words, you don't have to figure out how it's going to happen, what will happen, what elements have to change for me to be saved, to be rescued, to be healed. Swami takes care of all of that. It's suffice it to say that as long as you have established the connection and the resonance with Swami through your faith, then the grace is given where it is required. So grace is proportional to effort. So the sadhana that Swami has been asking us to do is to purify the lower mind and refine the higher mind. Many other sadhanas that has given us, things like the Omkar, etc. But perhaps if in this time we are to really, really establish strong, unshakable faith, because, Swami did say, be prepared for whatever it takes to show the world the real purpose of creation. We are in that time now. This process that is happening around us is like a spin cycle in a washing machine. Everything is being churned, and there's enormous love from Swami pouring onto the planet. And it is effecting changes, all the time changes. There will be a certain clearing out of the population of this planet, but it is systematically ushering in the golden age. Swami did say that somewhere in 2024, there will be unprecedented peace across the planet. And that's not very far away. So whatever is required for that change to happen, we are now in the midst of this turmoil, the spin of the washing machine. And so we need to ride the waves elegantly, and we need to use the surfboard of faith as our vehicle. And so investing in this faith, we need to take up two sadhanas that from Swami's instructions will provide us with the greatest progress. The first is, of course, the change in the diet, because the mind is in fact derived from the food. Whatever we take in through our five senses becomes the mind. And so if we are consuming largely rajasic, tamasic kinds of inputs, then that is what is going to dominate in our mind. And it is known that the rajasic, tamasic foods, one of their effects is to generate fear in the mind. So as is the food, so is the mind. And so this process has to be understood because Swami has given the information. There's an article called Food, Head and God, where he spells out in no uncertain detail, with clarity, how that change or the lack of change in the diet will impact on the mind. So that's the first sadhana to engage in. The second is the bhagavatam. How is this going to be put into place? How do we make it a regular part of our everyday life? Well, the one thing that a lot of people have now is the attribute of time. So if you're under lockdown, no matter what stage, then you're not tempted to rush out into the world and start to busy the mind with all its effects and worries and so on. It gives us the chance to turn inwards. We have space and time now to engage in the sadhana. And so one way is to try and create a regular routine in your daily life. Doesn't matter what time, but where you're exposing yourself to the bhagavatam of Sri Satya Sai. Whether you start an exercise in reading the Satya Sai speaks, reading the stories of the avatar in the early days. Professor Kasturi, who was Swami's, let's call him interpreter, was in fact an amazing man who chronicled the little events that happened in the early days in Prashanti. And the one book that he wrote called Loving God is an awesome experience of those little subtle things that were the miracles that were happening around. Worth a read. Even if you've read it before, go back to it and engage in this bhagavatam. Now, something I wanted to share with you about what Swami had said is that when you come to Prashanti Nilayam, you have traveled many, many thousands of kilometers, and you have come there to experience that supreme peace. You've come there to benefit from the darshan of the avatar. And every little event that is happening is in fact your bhagavatam. In fact, he told us, write down your experiences. Every time you come here, every day, write it down. And we did that as part of our faith in who Swami was, and we wrote down every encounter, every day, every darshan, every little detail of what it was. And he then said that in the years to come, this will be like a string of pearls that you can go back to. And each time you recall these events, it is an actual experience of your closeness to me. Isn't that an amazing thing? Each one of us has our own bhagavatam with Sri Satya Sai. And that is an awesome thing, because if we did do it in the early days, even if you just can recall, but writing it down gives a more clarity to it, then you have your own bhagavatam. Who knows? You can leave it to your children, grandchildren, and they will read the bhagavatam of you and marvel at the experience of who this avatar was. Now, here's something that we need to bear in mind. You know, the human mind, especially in the modern day times, the era of digital technology and rapid change, is cynical. It has become cynical, even for devotees. And we don't easily believe some of these things that Swami has done. It's a bit far for us. In the early days, it was much easier because we were in awe of the amazing reality shift that we had to experience when these miracles were happening in and around in our homes. And I remember one pivotal moment in my life with Swami. In our neighborhood, there was a school principal, and she lived a road below us, and we knew her as a family friend. And she had a pair of twin girls. And these phenomena were happening in her home. Vibhuti was appearing on the walls. There was all sorts of manifestations happening in this one particular room. And so on this particular day, she invited my dad and myself to come and have a look. And there were some other people there as well. And she took us up into this room. I remember there was a flight of stairs, and we entered this room, and everywhere, all the walls, thick cakings of vibhuti on the shrine. In fact, the room was turned into a shrine. Vibhuti, kunkum, all sorts of candy all around. And this was my first encounter of this kind of miracle. Now, I had just finished my medical training, thoroughly soaked in science, and all of this was a little bit overwhelming for me. I must say that sitting in that room, listening to what she was saying and the stories around it, I was a little cynical. And then suddenly there was a clap of thunder in the room. And mid-air, I saw these incense sticks form and fall to the carpet. Remember, it was a burgundy carpet. And she said, Swami is here. And she picked up these incense sticks and says, counted them, 9. There were 9 people in that room, excluding her, and she gave us each one. And this was quite a thing to experience, that kind of real life event of this nature. It shook me up. Now, as we were going out, going down to have some tea. My dad was the last one to leave, and this lady said, "Please, uncle, close the door. The children often go in and play with everything." So he closed the door behind him and started walking down, and the door opened and shut again. And she came running up and she said, "Swami is here." And she opened the door, and there on the outer side of the door, written in wet vibhuti, were the words, "Do not doubt God's miracle. Do not doubt God's miracles." And if ever there was a pivotal moment where I experienced that shift into knowing and believing and having the faith in who Bhagavan Sri Satya Sai Baba was, that would have been it. Absolutely astounding. My entire reality of what I thought was science got turned on its head. Suddenly you were encountering a being that transcended space and time and material and was just in command of everything. Now, that kind of being who has the mastery of all the 5 elements, mastery over the 5 functions of the body, mastery over the 5 senses of the body, and the mastery over consciousness and time. That kind of being is now your Sadguru. He's giving you the instructions as to how to navigate back to your home, your spiritual identity. And so that faith has to be developed by exposure to that kind of experiences. And you can never tire of listening to these stories. I remember in the early days, whenever we had sadhana camps, one of the activities we would engage in is to have a few people narrate some of these stories of their experiences with Sai. And or we would read out the experiences of other devotees in other countries. You know, quite awesome. There's this being who lives in Prashanti Nilayam, but appearing in many parts of the world to engage with these devotees, to give them that courage and to develop their faith in the fact that they were in fact God, faith in the fact that you have the grace of an avatar covering your back. And so when Swami assures us, "Did you wake up with another worry? Did you forget me again?" Right? Did you wake up with another worry? Did you forget me again? It is a telling indictment of our lack of faith. When that worry appears, when that anxiety appears, it's telling you that your faith is shaky, right? Worry, anxiety, and fear, whilst they are inherent in the way the mind works, cannot be the lot of devotee. We need to be developing this capacity that we can, in fact, constantly and assuredly depend on Satya Sai. What will trouble us the most is that our mind is going to try and second guess how it's going to happen. We want to tell the avatar how it should be done, right? Whereas he is looking after your journey for your best temporal and spiritual good. The ability to trust him and leave it to him is the challenge of the monkey mind. And so when the mind is constantly overactive, it doesn't allow this faith to develop. And so one of the things that you have to learn as spiritual aspirants, as devotees, is that adversity in your life, all adversities come as a consequence of your karmas. Right? There's nothing that can happen to you if you were not the first cause for it. All adversities have the hidden thread of faith developing. So if you understand that an adversity, no matter what it is an opportunity for you to truly and firmly strengthen your spiritual base by developing this faith. Because when you turn, even in your minutest of issues, to Swami, that resonance with him is happening. It's developing stronger and stronger and stronger until it becomes embedded and constantly resonating. So even in your sleep, you have the faith that Swami is protecting you. Even after this life is over, you still have the faith, because remember, mind travels with you after death, that there is Swami there with you, for you, ongoing. Now, this deeper understanding of the experience of faith has to be tested in the crucible of life. Every day when you awaken, awaken with the understanding that Swami is the indweller. O Lord, I am born from the womb of sleep. I am determined to carry out the day's tasks with Thee ever present before my mind's eye. Those words will remind you that Swami is the indweller. At night when you're going to bed, O Lord, the day's tasks are done. It was you who made me walk and talk and think and act. Receive me, I am coming home to you. Now that morning and evening prayer is a very simple way to establish the faith that Swami is with you always. Now, one of the reminders, a sadhana that Swami had given us many years ago, was the sadhana of practicing the Brahmananda mantra. So the Brahmananda mantra, and Swami gave it in English to us, is I am God. I am not different from God. I am the Akhanda Parabrahman. I am Sat Chit Ananda. Grief and anxiety can never affect me. I am ever content. Fear can never enter me. So there is another clue that where there is contentment, there cannot be fear. Where there is the absence of anxiety and worry, there will be this faith. And the faith now then is referring to our true identity, that we are the indivisible, supreme, absolute, eternal being, Atma. So the journey we're on is not just trying to survive in this physical body and make ends meet and make sure that we can live to a decent age. It really is about the spiritual challenge of where are you in your spiritual evolutionary path? How far along that path have you managed to get, using the wisdom that the Satguru has left for us? And so our spiritual effort now has to dive into another kind of a layer where we take the sadhana and we've got to first learn about it. In other words, how do you do it? We then have to experience the sadhana. In other words, in the doing of that sadhana, certain experiences will come from it. For example, if we're going to practice the bhagavatam and we're saying that the bhagavatam will bring faith as its outcome, then in doing the bhagavatam, you should notice more and more that the faith becomes stronger in you. Little evidences of this in your day-to-day life. And then finally, the third stage of the sadhana is to manifest the benefit of that sadhana. And so if it is the bhagavatam that we've been working with, then we should begin to experience the faith in all aspects of our life. Excuse me. Now that means that we are identifying that every aspect of our life is under the will and the control of Bhagavan. When we get to that level of conviction, of faith, then your individual will in fact, begins to fade away. Your will becomes the will of Swami. And this is a very, very heightened form of spiritual experience, which many of you can experience, and I know many who have, where that becomes the dominant experience in our day-to-day life, to the point where we are able to experience the presence of Swami in everything that we engage in, not just the mental talk, but in the heart, to feel that presence and to feel how his presence and influence is operating in your life. And so when we engage now the two sadhanas that we have spoken about, then this paradox of faith and fear will be addressed. In fact, who knows, maybe this coronavirus is a biological process that has given us this accelerated experience of faith and fear. And it is probably an accelerating sadhana for many, many of us, because we are challenged by it in a moment-to-moment experience, and we need to engage it at that level, trusting that this whole experience is a spiritual one. So whilst we get on with the mundane things in our day-to-day life, this kind of experience enables us to deepen our spiritual expectation of it. So in other words, what's the tapestry picture behind all of these events happening in the world? Why does everything appear to be collapsing, and why does everything appear to be meaningless? I've heard many, many people, some of them spiritual, some of them not, but equally voicing the same concerns. What's the point of it? What's the point of all this effort in building these institutions and so on when everything is collapsing? Well, much of it is collapsing because it is not rooted in truth. And so the change that has to happen to bring in this golden age. Now, remember that the golden age is not a moment in time. It is a state of awareness. And Swami many, many times has said that whilst you're living in the so-called Kali Yuga, if your awareness is sattvic enough and refined enough, then you will be living in the golden age. So it is a state of awareness. And it is that resonance, it's that raising the vibration of our spiritual awareness. And the ultimate is that when it becomes resonant with the omnipresent Swami, then you begin to resonate to that divine melody that he will put out for you. It's almost a kind of a instructional communication happening at a much deeper level. And your survival will be more than 100 times easier once you've tuned in and let Swami. So the challenge for us, and the challenge of living in this time, is that we've unfortunately trained ourselves to trust our mind and our egos more than our Atma. It is habituated. It's so deeply entrenched that we've got to break these habits. And so Swami is giving us experiences where this repetitive, habitual process of repeating these habits that trap us, he's giving us the opportunity to identify and break it down, never to return. And faith is the supreme spiritual attribute that you will need to have to be able to tackle those innermost habitual stifling patterns of behavior that have come from many, many past lifetimes. It is a very, very advanced level of your experience, which Swami is giving you now, if you understand it, then you'll make the effort to deepen that experience. But it starts with just that very, very simple thing. Let's not make it too intellectual. There's no courses to do. There's no study to do. It is just immersing in this divine bhagavatam of who and what Satya Sai is. Out of that comes the outpouring of love from our Satguru, and the wisdom begins to enter. And so when we have that faith, we will trust his words. And if we have the faith, we will have the ability to implement what he has asked us, even though it may not be, but we have recourse to that avatar in that we just ask. We say, Swami, help me with this. And that response is assured. Now, the faith, excuse me, the faith and the fear paradigm is an eternal challenge. It has been there on the part of any spiritual aspirant from any culture, any spiritual tradition. It has always been the challenge. Biblically, this was the 40 days and nights where Jesus faced the uncontrolled mind in the desert and conquered it. And so part of our spiritual understanding is that we are going through the process of mastering the mind, conquering the mind, where it becomes amanaska. So without mind, meaning there are no distortions, no pollutants in the mind. What we have is in fact a mind that will simply obey the Atmika instructions. A very powerful state of mind to have and to develop. So I'm going to end there. I hope it's been of some value. There's lots of takeaway things we can do, but I would bring it down to just two things. One, the sadhana of changing your diet. Without that, there is no possible progress. Two, introduce the Bhagavatam. I've explained what the Bhagavatam is. Now engage it. You can do some of this at a family level, some of it individually. You have your phones, you have TVs, everything. There's all sorts of ways of accessing many of these things. And really, it is about diving deep and experientially engaging with the avatar, living the experiences as he unfolded them and made it available to those devotees. Watch the awe that arises in you, the shift in your mind, the shift in your heart. They're subtle things, but there's something quite incredible to observe as you deepen that experience. So loving God is an amazing dip into that Bhagavatam. Iswarama, the chosen mother, another dip into that. And then the Satya Sai speaks, all of them, all the volumes, that chronicles the life of Sri Satya Sai. As you delve into the early days of who and how Swami had to live and how he selflessly gave all the time, nothing for himself. These stories will embed themselves in your mind. And when the mind is idle, it'll turn to these experiences and the resonance between you and Swami will start to happen. Most beautiful experience once you develop this faith. So the Bhagavatam is the second sadhana. So I'm going to end it there, and maybe we can now take some questions. Om Sai
Ram. Thank you, Dr. Cooppan. I think that was absolutely amazing. And I'm sure everyone on the study circle has actually enjoyed it. I think we're going to take a few questions from the chat box. Brother Anab, is there questions? I believe there's one.
Yes, there is one, Brother Henry. So, Brother Rajen, here is the question. Can you please share how important is daily sadhana and some of the daily practices? Example, Omkar, Suprabhatam, meditation, Gayatri Mantra, etc. Also, will you be covering these daily practices in future study circles?
Okay, so let's first understand what sadhana is, right? So sadhana is the inward path, where instead of allowing the mind to go outwards, we adopt certain spiritual exercises to redirect the mind inward and then deal with it. Now, all sadhana is directed at the mind, and largely it's the lower mind, but also does affect the higher mind. And it is a purificatory process. So things like changing the diet, Omkar, the Suprabhatam. Swami has given so many, and you don't have to do all of them. The idea that you have to take on Omkar, Suprabhatam, meditation, Gayatri Mantra, all of that becomes a ritual routine, and you don't really enjoy and get the grace of the sadhana when we do that. Choose a sadhana that is meaningful to you. It can be one or two. Now, Gayatri Mantra is the sadhana for the higher mind. It's the universal mantra that refines the intellect. It purifies the intellect and refines it. The other sadhanas like Omkar, Namasmarana, the constant remembrance of the name and form of God with love and devotion. Simple sadhana, but profound effects that it will have. Yeah, so choose the sadhana. The first advice that I can give from our years of experience within the organization is that you don't have to do all of them. Expose yourself to it, find out, okay, so how is and what is Omkar? We can cover that. What is Namasmarana? We can cover that. In fact, if I remember correctly, some years back, we made a sadhana series, an audio series of 8 sadhanas. I'm going to see if I can find that, and I'll put it in your hands, Henry, and you can see if you can make it available to devotees. How to practice silence, for example, how to do the Jyoti meditation. All of those things are very simple. But the dive into the sadhana is, as I said, 3 steps. 1, what is the sadhana and what is it supposed to be doing? So knowledge about it, expose yourself to that, read about it. Swami has given any number of talks on it. Second is to engage the sadhana, practice it. So that might require a little bit of adjustment, because sometimes you're doing a sadhana and you may not be doing it exactly as it should be done. Case in point, Gayatri Mantra. If we don't chant the Gayatri Mantra with the right meter and speed, and Gayatri should be chanted within 12 seconds, there is no other tune for the Gayatri Mantra. There's only one, and Swami has given that. There's an audio of Swami chanting the Gayatri. So as we benefit from that sadhana, then we experience the actual manifestation of what that sadhana is supposed to do. And in almost all instances, if we're doing the sadhana right, it'll lead you to the inner experience of peace, inner experience of love, and inner experience of silence. That is how you know the sadhana, because the mind will not be so active. Sadhanas take often years. Swami said, you do the Omkar because you're carrying lifetimes of these vasanas in your mind that have to be cleared. So the more we invest time in a sadhana, and the easiest of all of these sadhanas, because it doesn't need space, time, any special attention, it is the Namasmarana. You just choose the name and form of God that appeals to you. And remember that Namasmarana is not repetition. It is remembrance. It's an emotional remembrance of your relationship with that form of God. It is the most beautiful experience, because it's not done by counting japamalas of how many you've done and so on. Not that. It's the resonance. You start to feel the presence of this being that you define as your Ishta Devata. So I think, yes, we may I'm not sure how easy it will be to do in this format, but we can expose the different sadhanas, at different times. Maybe do one per study circle, and we can engage it in that way and make it available. So in other words, teaching devotees how to do the sadhanas. Maybe we should get a kind of a sense of how many people don't know how to do the sadhana. That might be worth knowing before we move into an actual program.
Yes, yeah, you're right, Dr. Cooppan. I think what we'll do a field study and see how we're going to go forward, because this study circle is many to come. So we definitely will have a program and a timeline as to how we can achieve all of that. And I think it's brilliant the devotees are asking about sadhanas, because that's one thing that we need to imbibe in our lives. If anyone got any questions, you can raise your hands as well, and we'll give you an opportunity to speak. And I think we got more chat box, Brother Anab.
Yes, Brother Henry, there are questions pouring in. So let me just go sequentially. Okay, so there's a message. Thank you, Dr. Cooppan, for an amazing session. Please, can an audio of this session be shared on our WhatsApp group? Yes, definitely, that will be shared. Then there's a message expressing gratitude for the wisdom and guidance. I'll move on to the question. Om Sai Ram, my biggest problem is not faith, but fear. How can I overcome this?
So that is the classic spiritual challenge, right? If you have, as I said earlier, if you have fear, then it means that your spiritual base is weak. Now, this is not a condemnation of your effort, etc. It's just saying that that's where you are. And so we said that the way to overcome fear is not to engage the thing that is bringing you fear. We need to develop the faith in who Swami is. And so the bhagavatam becomes your sadhana. In other words, the more you expose yourself to who and what Swami is and how he operated in this world and how he transcended space and time and all the elements and so on, in the effort of rescuing his devotee, of changing the circumstances, even preventing devotees from dying in different circumstances, taking on the illnesses. All of that gives us the reassurance that you have this mighty, indestructible, indivisible, supreme, absolute power that has got your back. So what thing can create the fear for you? Now, if we interrogate this a bit more from our experience within the organization, very often that fear will come back to the diet. Something in the diet is not right, because the rajasic, tamasic tendencies coming from the food and other sensory inputs is going to create that fear in the mind, and that's what you're experiencing. Okay, so the answer is it's the bhagavatam that will help you conquer the fear.
Thank you, Brother Cooppan. That's very enlightening. Let me move on to the next question. If we are developing our faith in Swami, developing faith and Swami is protecting us, do we still need to be vaccinated? Some people I know who are spiritual aspirants don't believe they need it.
Yeah, I think, there's something that Swami told us many, many times. He says, common sense before divine sense. Now, why would you need to take the vaccination in this third wave? The answer is that the vaccine does not prevent you from getting COVID. If you're exposed, you will get COVID. But if you've had the vaccine, then the chances of you developing severe disease is muted. The chances of you ending up intubated, in other words, needing a breathing support, or in an ICU situation, is vastly reduced. All the statistics coming from the groups at the forefront are providing us that information, that 95% of the people who are ended up in ICU and on life support are people who have not been vaccinated, right? So we might say that, yes, Swami will protect. Swami will protect you probably from not getting infected. But your common sense living in this world says that you must do things that protect your body, and that would be the way to approach it. It is not, it's not like, well, Swami said he'll protect us, why must we take the vaccine? They're not the same thing. You have to understand your life in the three-dimensional world. You're exposed to certain dangers, and this is one of them. And there are certain scientific processes that have been put into place. See, one of the biggest fears sitting in the background of this vaccine is that what else is it going to do to us? I've heard this many times because indeed people are getting sick from side effects of the vaccine. It's not being totally shared with everybody that that's a possibility, but it certainly is saving lives in terms of, if you are one of those people with comorbid disease, it'll save your life, right? You're not going to get the severe form of the disease. So in all of this, you know, every day when we get up and go to work on the front line, we start with that prayer to Swami, to be the ever-present guide and guardian to us and to our patients, right? You have to trust that process, that he knows what is best for us and how this must take its course. So, you know, if he comes to you in your inner experience and he tells you you don't need to have the vaccine, then that's your one-on-one. It doesn't apply to everybody. I'll give you an example. In an interview that we had, there were a mixed group. There was a Chinese lady present, and Swami was talking to her, and he said, you have heart disease. And she says, no, Swami, I don't. He says, yes, you have heart disease. Then she admitted, yes, she has. And he then manifested this packet of tablets. And then he asked someone for a pin, tore the thing open. He told her, take 2 of these 2 times a day. And then he said something to her very interesting. He says, you should have chicken soup every day for the next 6 months. Now, was that now an instruction for everyone to go and eat chicken? Of course not. It was directed at that individual's needs. And that was what actions were for her. That we had to hear it was part of, obviously, our training to understand how this was given by an avatar. Okay.
Thank you, Brother Cooppan. I have got another, there's a continuation of the previous question. Also, I know that this has nothing to do with developing our faith, but where could I read about your comment on the mind does not die?
Oh, that is contained in, if you go to the Vahini series, I think it may be in Prashanti Vahini. It certainly is in the Summer Showers series for 1990, 1991, and I think maybe 1993. So when we die, the mortal coil, that's the physical body, and what is called the etheric body goes back to its elements. What then continues along, because you still have karmic debt to pay, is your mind and the emotions. So they ride with you lifetime after lifetime. That's why getting rid of these vasanas is such an effort, because it's coming from other lifetimes as well. So I can't give you exactly, but Just check out those references that I've given you. It'll be in one of those summer showers, 1990, 91, or 93. And then the Prashanti Vahini, I think it might be there.
Thanks, Dr. Cooppan. Hannah, I think you got another question, another comment.
Yes, yes. Please explain grace.
Okay, so grace is that intervention that Swami confers on us to mute the impact of a karma or series of karma in our life. Right, so a good example of this is grace is like the morphine injection that is given. The pain is still there, but it blunts your experience of the pain. Another example of grace is that your karma was to fall from a 10-story building and die, but the grace of the avatar is that you slip on the sidewalk and you sprain your ankle. Grace is also where the avatar takes on takes on a life-threatening disease. And this happened, of course, in 1962, just before the Guru Purnima festival, when Swami took on a devotee's heart attack. Clot from the heart went up to the brain and he developed a left-sided paralysis. For 10 days, they thought he was going to die, and it was quite a profound experience for Professor Kasturi and those around him. And as it got closer to the actual Guru Purnima discourse, Swami asked Professor Kasturi for a glass of water. He then dipped his fingers into it, sprinkled it over his left side of his body, got up and went out and did the whole discourse. And in that discourse, he declared who he was as the avatar. Right? So grace can come in many forms. Very often it is very physical and tangible, where it saves us. You can see the before-after kind of effect. Sometimes it's subtle, and you only recognize it, maybe days later or maybe months later, that this was grace. Grace is, so we have that grace that is ever available to us. It's like your credit balance in your bank as you do sadhana, right? So grace is proportionate to the effort of sadhana. The more consistent and regular is your sadhana, the more the grace capacity for grace builds up. Then you have special grace, where Swami makes the decision to intervene in your karma and take it away. He takes it upon himself. And we've seen many times where one day he's walking on the sand, and this is in the early days, and he walks barefoot, of course, and his feet are clear. Next day, he's got this huge tumor on his foot. Third day, tumor is gone. So he's taken it on from some devotee. We don't know where in the world, or so that is because the avatar knows everything about you, past, present, future, and he knows also the effort you're making, and it activates this form of grace. So for you to earn the grace of Swami, it needs your effort. Now, you can't go out and calculate and say, you know what, I did 4 japamalas. How much of grace is that? It doesn't work like that, right? You just have to build up this store of doing more good than bad, and the grace will be available. I think the greatest grace we've all had is that we are born as contemporaries of this avatar. That is grace second to none. You could not have even figured to do that yourself. That is just your good punya, your spiritual merit that has earned you that right. Of all the people in the world, 7 billion people on this planet, not that many know about who Swami is, and not that many have access to his teachings. Right? When Swami declared, for whom have I come? He says, I've not come for the atheist. They are ungodly and do not want to know. I've not come for the God-fearing, for they already know the path and must travel it. I have come for those who are weak of will and feeble of mind. Weak of will and feeble of mind. That's you and I. And he's gathering us and turning our minds to God. So that is ultimate grace in any way. Just for you to know who the avatar is, that's already grace. Hope I've answered that.
Thank you, Dr. Cooppan. At this, we will just change the structure. Now we got two hands up. We'll ask Uncle Subri to please unmute himself and give your comments. Thank you, Uncle Subri.
Om Sai Ram, everyone. Dr. Cooppan, not a question, but an ounce of practice is more effective than tons of knowledge. And I just want to share my experiences because it was through you and your talks that my life turned around, because I used to be committing the sins of the body, eating meat, drinking, and wasn't even doing any kind of prayer. But by listening to the talk, I decided there while sitting, and while you are talking, I said, I want to go down there and start to practice. And this is like since I think 1982. And I started the daily meditation prayer from then till now, and read the summer showers, read summer showers, read the books that you just said now with Swami's miracles, and it helped me out tremendously, in the process, and a lot of grace, and have improved a lot. Still not there, far away to go, but by going down to the ground and practicing and listening to this, and the Satya Shivam Sundarams were very, very inspiration that installed a lot of faith in me, and it took out a lot of fear, because you got God inside you, around you, above you, below, all over you. What is there to fear about? But coming back to the COVID, you got to take the necessary safety precautions. For me, I felt that I must take these injections because that's going to help, because as you said, common sense. But what I'm coming back to, Doc, just to when you listen to people speaking and when it's inspiring, the only time we're going to reap the maximum benefit if we go out there and try our level best to put it into practice. Because as Swami says, grace is equal to the proportion and effort and sacrifice that we put in. Sairam.
Okay. Saram, Brother Cooppan, I'll go to the next question before we go on to the next speaker. I recently made a tough decision at work. I, of course, looked at pros and cons, which led to my decision. However, I'm fearful of the future. How do I overcome this?
So I'm assuming that the decision was to leave work, is it? Or whatever the decision is.
It is not mentioned here.
Okay, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's obviously this is the decision. The decision has left this person in a state of fearfulness about the future. All right. Now, two things that we can turn to immediately. Swami has said that whatever you decide to do, whatever you choose to do, he has given you all the attributes you will need. He has given you the mind. He has given you the strength of intellect, courage, ability, skills. All of those things are embedded in the Antakarna. And so all of those things are empowered by the divine. Now, all you need to do is whatever the future is. Remember, the future is not written. You create it. So you need to first decide what it is that you want to do. Whatever it is, you offer that to Swami and recognize that he is the doer, right? So whatever your decision, whatever your plan, just to know that Swami is the indweller, he is the doer, he is the conscience, he is the intellect, he is the insight, he is the foresight in everything that you do. Once you travel with that faith, right? Remember, fear of the future is not trusting that the avatar knows how to navigate you. Right? Again, it comes back. That's why it's such a core sadhana that we all have to engage, because until you 100% trust who this avatar is, you cannot expect the grace. Even if you've got 99.9% faith, it may not give you the grace. It needs to be 100% faith, and it will. And that is why your immersion into the bhagavatam is such an important sadhana. You need to know, convince yourself, your heart, your mind, that there's nothing that Swami can't do for you. He'll rescue you from anything. He'll guide you down the path of what is going to be good for you. But remember, in everything, he's given you that intelligence, the buddhi, the courage. You can choose to do whatever it is you want, and it will succeed. You never need to fear whether a thing is going to be successful or not. That's your doubting ego mind doing its bit. You have to trust that. Remember, you're a creator being as well, right? Firstly, you are embodied with Atma. All that creative ability comes from the Atma. You then need to decide what is it that you want. In other words, become a deliberate creator of your future. Think it out, say, right, I want this, etc. However you want to. Then, once you know what you want, now you make sure that you invite Swami into the whole game and engage it. There'll be adjustments that have to happen, etc. But shouldn't fear whether you're going to succeed or not. It would be good to have a little bit more information, but I'm giving you a very general kind of response to that.
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Cooppan. We're just going to go to Sister Asha. And if we can, Brother Anab, combine the question due to time constraints, we'll get Sister Asha to please address us and unmute yourself. And then Brother Anab, if you can take us to the questions after that. Sister
Sure,
Anab.
Brother.
Sister Asha, you can unmute yourself and speak. Sister Asha, you can unmute. Okay, Brother Anab, I think we're going to come back to her if you can.
Sure.
There's a question.
Yeah. In the interest of time, I'm going to combine three questions, Brother Cooppan. So the first one is, Sai Ram, thank you, Doctor, for enlightening us so lovingly. Please give us a reminder of what the Bhagavatam is. That's the first question. Then from another devotee, a question, how does an individual with a condition of OCD compare faith and fear? And I am not seeing another question. So you can take these two. I'll look into the other questions. There's been too many messages.
Okay, so what is the Bhagavatam? The Bhagavatam is the study and the immersion of our mind and emotions into the story of the avatars and their devotees, and experiencing the evocation of devotion from the devotees to God. So that whole experience of leelas and miracles and how the devotees have responded to it, it begins to build your faith into who the omnipresent God is. Right? We know him as Sri Satyasai. You may have any other Ishta Devatar, but whatever it is, just to know that there is this omnipresent being constantly in your presence, able to help you with whatever it is. Okay, so that's the first one. Sorry, just remind me about the second question, Anand.
Yes, that was related to the OCD. How does an individual with a condition of OCD compare faith and fear?
Yeah, this is a very tough one because OCD is a distortion of the mind. It's a kind of a loop where it could be OCD around cleaning, could be OCD around repetitive habits. It's a very difficult condition to treat medically, but it is rooted in the mind. Somewhere in the past, could be a past life, some type of fear has triggered this repeated need to perform the same action again and again and again. And the only advice I can give this person is to, once again, immerse yourself in the bhagavatam, and then constantly, the sadhana that would work the best for this kind of condition is namasmarana, to constantly, and perhaps the Gayatri mantra as well. So that would be a way to minimize the constant mental need to repeat the OCD action. But don't think it out so much. I think you just need to trust that if you leave this in Swami's hands, he will take care of it. You have to ask, of course, to help you.
Sure. Thank you, Doctor. There are a lot of comments, but I'm going to go to the questions. There is only one question which says, why does Swami address us as Bangaru?
So Bangaru in Telugu means gold, and he views you as a spiritual being, as being gold to him. Very precious, very dear. Right? So that alone can give you so much of confidence and faith that if Swami regards you as being Bangaru, then that's what you are. You are an extremely valuable entity.
Okay, the next question is, how would you explain the fact that even the most ardent devotees of Swami have succumbed to COVID, where sincere faith and effort was always present in those devotees? Does this go back to karma?
Yeah, almost certainly it will go back to karma. So yes, you can have all of that faith and devotion to Swami, but if it's your karmic trail and the need of the hour is that you need to go through this COVID experience, then you will go through it. Again, it's the special grace that Swami can intervene with. But most times, redemption of karma is that you still have to go through it, but he mutes the pain and the discomfort. So maybe going through the karma was through COVID was a necessary part of that individual's karma. But who's to say Swami took away the need for ICU, intubation, severe disease? We would never know that. That's one-on-one between Swami and that devotee.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Cooppan. I think lots of the questions and lots of the comments are more gratitude, and I'm sure we're going to do that now. We'd like to thank everyone for being part of the study circle. And as I said, it's not the first one. It's going to be many more to come. So please watch your diaries and the announcements coming via the Sri Satya Sai Global Council website. We will actually have this study circle as well, recording sent to every devotee in the country. Just from our side, Dr. Cooppan, I would say On behalf of the Sri Satya Sai Global Council, we'd like to say many thanks to Swami for this platform. We are so blessed and to have Dr. Cooppan as our presenter tonight. And for us, the doctor, we would like to express our heartfelt love to you for sharing in your precious time and making the effort so immensely to widen and give us your knowledge and wisdom. And for this, we are ever grateful. There will be many more of these study circles come. And as I said earlier on, we'll let you know on the website and through our announcements. Please, though, for those that have missed it, don't despair. The recording will be available to all Sri Satya Sai Global Council members in the next few weeks. Dr. Cooppan will be back on our study circle program. Please make a note of this date on the 17th of October. It's a Sunday. It's the same time, 6:30 to 8 p.m. And the topic will be Resonance with Swami. Your vibratory frequencies. Please diarize the date and do not miss this study circle. As I say, it's for many more to come as well. From all of us, Dr. Cooppan, on behalf of the Sri Satya Sai Global Council, we'd like to say a very big thank you for you to share your time, especially in your very, very compact program. And to the devotees that made yourself available tonight, we'd like to say thank you as well. And please take care. Jai Sai Ram.